it starts with the band playing a club, and then they make their way to the Park Slope, this residential neighborhood in Brooklyn, Park Slope, where the play is set, and they find themselves ensconced in a very designed, aesthetically rigorous home.
It's
It's a
definitely
musical.
it's definitely a musical. Everybody on stage sings. Almost everybody plays an instrument, and the ones that don't play instruments will be forced to by the rock and roll band, because that's how rock and roll bands do.
You're going to have to pull out the flute from the fifth grade.
Yeah, if you're around, you got to play something. That's kind of how it goes. So yeah. So everybody's playing, everybody's singing. It's
a party.
It's 10 people.
10, yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear 10 people singing together. It's lovely. Rock and roll encompasses a lot. And the fact that this is a middle-aged band means they've been around a long time. So, I mean, you've got pretty much, we touch on almost everything, that's, existed in our sort of like, Western pop cultural, music. There's people will hear, harmonies that remind them of things in the 60s. You'll hear straight up blues numbers. You'll hear things that are slightly jazzy. You'll hear things that sound like punk rock sometimes. It's very eclectic, highly melodic, rhythmically based, music. It's I personally come from, I'm old enough to where I'm very much a 60s kid. That's just how it happened. I was born in 1961, so the music of, Beatles and Motown and, infectious hooks with driving rhythms, these are things that excite me. I know they still excite, my daughter. She's 21 and she knows that stuff is still great. I've tested it on her, so I know it's true, And I think we know what gets people going, I mean, there's a certain kind of, there's something to that music that infected the people who grew up with it, and kind of made them dream in a way that I've noticed that other generations don't. That music made us dream in a particular way that other generations, I'm not saying any better or worse, but the music of the 60s made us think in a particular way. I think it made us think we could change the world. And I think it created people like the people in this play who felt that with their art and with their choices they could change the world, and maybe the world became smaller and suddenly only became what was under their roof. But I honestly feel like I grew up with this. I mean, not to get, political, but I mean, I grew up with the Beatles and I grew up with Martin Luther King, I mean, I grew up with, these were the same force for me, this idea of reaching further, and you can have more than just you've got. I mean, musically, the Beatles were saying that. We can do more. We can go beyond just the three chords, and we can have cellos, and we can have, orchestras, and we can have all these fancy sounds. And the political people of the 60s were saying the exact same thing. Just this that we've been handed is maybe not enough. We could try to go for more, And that's what the artists in this play, that's the generation that they're from. From that generation, like, I can dream, I can get more. And then when you try, then you sometimes run into reality. But I think these people are in some way a part of that time. They're all born around, I like to think, that they're all born around, 61, 64, 65, and that's kind of like who they are. So I co-wrote the music with Heidi Rodewald, who is the co-writer of, co-composer in Passing Strange and co-composer in everything that I've been doing for the last, 10 or 15 years. Heidi and I were both from Southern California. We both grew up listening to the same radio stations. We grew up 2 years apart, so we share an aesthetic. I can just tell Heidi this scene needs something kind of like this, and she nails it, and it's pretty organic. There's not a lot of talking. It's usually like a half a sentence description. I might even sometimes say, do something like what that character would listen to. Like if we have the character in mind, and I'll say, hey Heidi, can you just like write something like, what would he be listening to on the radio? And she always comes up with it. And that's from being from the same region and same era. And so she's half of the music, essentially. I write all the text. I write the book and the lyric, and Heidi and I share the music duties. And we it's very, yeah. There's no like sort of program like what she does best versus what I do best musically. It's from character to character really who we decide, and sometimes it's just random. You know, we'll write something for one character and it turns out to be better for the other. What I do like though that we take a non-musical theater approach in that we want to honor the live event as a concert, not as does this fit for this scene or whatever. It's more like, does this fit for the entire space of time that we're doing it in? Do you know what I mean? We think of it like, we've been talking a lot about whether this play is kind of like an album. It's called Family Album, whether it's like one song after another, just like at a set of music or a live music set or an album. And that's how we come up with it. We're thinking about it as this event. Sometimes in musical theater, from my taste, the music sometimes is a bit of a slave to the narrative. And what I love is when the music just is whatever we feel like it being. And if someone says, well, we could really use this moment, well, no, but if it's working, it's working. The other thing about rock and roll, and the thing that Heidi understands like I do, is that in theater, you have this idea that the protagonist is sort of supposed to like go through all these changes and stuff, and I love all that. That's wonderful. But in rock and roll, often we stay the same. We want the audience to go through changes. The audience is kind of like the protagonist at a rock show. Dylan doesn't really change. He changes songs, but he doesn't really change. But you're supposed to walk away changed. Same way like in church, right? You're supposed to walk away feeling like something has happened. And something has moved you, to be a different person, And I think ultimately that's what Heidi understands, that this is a live event. And that's my phrase that we stole from Joanna. But I like that phrase, live event. I mean, it's live, it's happening now,
So there can't be some rule for the structure of how a musical goes that means it's dull for a minute.
Right.
There's no structure or rule or character rule that means it's boring for a minute. Not 1 minute.
Yeah.
Not 5 seconds.
Yeah. Heidi and I come from clubs. We come from the clubs. And when we first got into musical theater, I didn't know that it was the right place for us. And then I started reading about Shakespeare actually, and reading about the world that those plays used to inhabit, and I was like, and I'm like, oh, so the theater was in a rough neighborhood. People were drinking while watching. People were drinking while watching the stuff. There were men dressed as women. I've played that club, I played that club my whole life. I've been there. People screaming at the stage. It's like, I recognize that, I recognize that. This is not about being ensconced away in some corner of Cambridge with a dusty book. It's about what? A live event, right? This is happening right now, and it's very rock and roll. Shakespeare's very rock and roll. I think everybody who looks hard at it, not just what he did, but I'm talking about even like the venues, the old way. I saw a rendering of some artist had made of a Shakespeare play that was happening where there were literally like ruffians storming the stage, and a guy on stage who looked like a roadie kicking at these guys who were storming the stage. Yeah. I've been at that club. Yeah. I've been playing that club for my whole life, That's not fancy pants, theater. That's like rough and ready, real people getting drunk and yelling at the stage, I was like, okay, I recognize this. I'm all right. I can be here. I'm welcome. I'm welcome here. This is our place. We're welcome here. I don't really feel that I create characters. I'm a musician. I hear the instrument, I hear the player, and I go, oh, you sound like you'd be good playing this. And then I write the melody. You know what I mean? I have the melody in mind, but when I hear the player sort of tells me how the song should go. And the actor is both the instrument and the player. at the same time. So I hear this actor and I go, okay, that's how you go. I'm going to bring in something tomorrow for you. It's like I want to please, in a way, they're like my first audience, the actors are. I want to please them. I want to make them happy. I want to bring them something that makes them shine, you know. And so often I'll even do it in the text, you know. I'll sneak in something in the text even that I know that an actor is interested in. So they'll have a personal relationship to it, you know. These are just some of the tactics I use, but I'm happy to do it because I want them to feel personal about it, you know. I want them to feel personal about it. I want them to, you know, take it as their own.
You also get this feeling when he does that, that it's perfect. There's some little detail about that exact performer and that exact part that makes the moment just crystalline. It's not someone filling a slot that could be filled by many. Like it's an absolutely tailored, signature, crystalline. These exact people in this exact place with this exact audience. And this song comes out of that. And you really don't feel like you are in a neutral, it's not doing a play.
Right.
We're not doing a play.
Yes.
It's the creation of a spontaneous live event.